everyone, welcome to Chalchitra Talks. I'm Vaani, and this is another of our guest episodes. I have with us Dhruv Sehgal, who is an actor, writer, and director, and quite recently he won the Critics Filmfare Award for Best Actor in Comedy Series for Little Things. A few days ago, I had this opportunity to sit down with him and talk about books that have changed our perspectives. And it was one of the most wholesome conversations I've had, so much so that I remember getting off the call and immediately picking up most of the books that we had discussed. So let's just jump right in. Hi Dhruv, how are you? Welcome to Chalchitra Talks.
Thank you. I'm very good. I hope you're well too.
Pehle to Vaibhav has told me so much about you. He speaks so highly of you, and he always is constantly talking about you. I mean, last night he was telling me कि आपने Miranda July उसे recommend करी थी. And uske baad we just read her works for a few weeks on live streams. So I wanted to know, what are your favorite short stories of Miranda July?
I don't remember the names. I remember what happened in them. I remember there was one in which she lives in a town where there is no swimming pool,
Okay. Yeah.
but she's taking swimming classes indoors. तो kitchen बड़ा है, तो kitchen में सब pretend कर रहे हैं swim करने का. That is one. Then there is one called The Boy, called Liam, something like that. I think that's also very nice. I'm genuinely very blank. Not because I don't remember, but because Miranda July is so much like a matrix of sorts, no? Because it's not like she writes simple, but one story is weird. All her characters are weird. All her stories are weird, yet they're so supremely human that it all sounds like one song, which is why I'm kind of going blank. I guess everyone should pick the book. No one belongs here more than you.
Yes, I think हमने वहीं से short stories पढ़ी थी. Yeah.
Both me and my partner saw her film together. We read her books together, and we sort of did this cute thing without knowing we are doing a cute thing, where she read the books when we were not dating, and she underlined paragraphs that stayed with her.
Yeah.
And then I reread the same book, and I was always curious about what did she connect with and what did I connect with. And we both kind of really look up to her.
So do you also underline while you read?
Only in that one. Otherwise, I use Kindle for some books. So there I highlight. Nowadays, what's happening every time I'm reading books, because I'm writing a lot these days, it sounds like complete shit, but I'm using books very transactionally. This I can use somewhere. This I can, this works with that character. And, oh yeah, this is what I'm also trying to explore. So I end up doing it for those books. But there are some books that I don't do it for because I know I'm going to revisit them anyway. And those are my favorite books.
So you have a process of taking notes as well while you read?
It started only in the second half of this year. Because I got the Kindle, and that highlighting option is very cool in that,
Yeah. So, is there something that you miss about paperbacks?
No, not really, to be honest. Because I can still take a photo and put it on my laptop, but I'm not that organized.
So Vaibhav and I were discussing this thing on one of our live streams, and
even I really, this sounds like Diwali ho usne mujhe mithai di to main bhi mithai de raha hu. But even I really look up to Vaibhav, and the funny thing is, we keep sharing things about other people who we look up to, so the niche quotes or something that someone has done, we like, fuck, ye kitna cool hai, fuck, ye kitna cool hai. But I'm Vaibhav and the entire team. I never separate Vaibhav from Saurabh, and now you, I guess. So yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, to do something with grit and with so much of persistence is a rare quality in our whatever society. So kudos to you guys.
Thank you so much, Dhruv. So we were discussing this one thing in a live stream, and Vaibhav said something on the lines कि अगर एक story is set in the night, but अगर उसे पसंद नहीं आ रही, he'll imagine it कि दिन चल रहा है. And are you okay with that kind of envisioning? Ki you build your own vision as you go of the story that's being read. For example, आपने 50th page तक एक character imagine किया है, and 51st पे the author points it out कि उसके brown बाल हैं, but you don't like it. So would you change the character as the author is telling you, or would you just keep on imagining him the way you want to?
I'll keep imagining him like the writer intended. Because I'm a writer myself, rather a screenwriter, and I have these battles with my directors that what the fuck, was supposed to be a middle class house. What is this black lounger doing? Black colored sofa, leather lounger. Just be true to the story, right? And organically, not because I have to fight myself from imagining it. For someone like me, I marinate in my own thoughts so much to the point that I get tired of myself, which is why Miranda July works, because it's a sudden release. So you take me wherever you want to take me. And I'll be very confused. Like I'm confused in most stories, and especially sci-fi films and thrillers. I have no fucking idea what's happening, but I try to be invested.
I'm really jealous of people who can finish a horror book that way because I just cannot. There's not one horror story book that I've read. आज तक like starting से end तक.
यार मैंने ट्रू डिटेक्टिव के बाद I bought H.P. Lovecraft का एक दो books, but no, I didn't read it. I don't know whether you'll call Gillian Flynn as horror. No, I don't think you can call her that. I haven't read one either. I mean, Ghostbusters, of course. No, Ghost Stories. What the fuck? Adil Sen क्या लिखता था यार? Goosebumps. Sorry.
Goosebumps. Yeah.
Yeah. So I read shit tons of those.
We used to have a lot of them in the library, and I remember I never touched that section. I did try picking up a Ghost Stories of Shimla Hills, which is very famous in Himachal, and I'm from Himachal. And वहाँ पे every party में these stories were discussed.
Yeah. तो वो किसने लिखी है?
It's by a woman called Meenakshi. I forget her last name, but she's written those. So she's gone and interviewed people there, like Himachal के लोगों से, Shimla के लोगों से, and then all those stories, she's penned them down. I
remember this one ghost story that I read, and this is the entire story, by the way. It's by Mr. Bond, where a man climbs, I'm paraphrasing it, a man climbs down the hill. Someone stops him to ask him the time, and he looks at his watch and it says it's 8:10, and he looks up, but there's no one there. So I remember that very vividly. Yeah. That's probably the last ghost story I ever read. Are ghost stories meant to spook you out, or are they just meant to like titillate you in some sense? Like, are they supposed to just make you excited, or are they supposed to scare you? Like, can ghost stories scare you?
I think that's one of the purposes. People get scared.
Never heard anybody say कि मैं पढ़ के ना मेरी फट गई. Like more people say that for manuals that come with their gadgets. कि अरे उसका देखकर मेरी फट गई.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. So also, मैंने हिंदी किताबें ज़्यादा नहीं पढ़ी हैं. My only introduction to Hindi literature is Ibn Insha and Harivansh Rai Bachchan and Premchand. And I realized you follow a lot of hashtags on Instagram of Hindi poets. So what would you say would be a good endpoint for someone like me who wants to pick up Hindi literature but does not know where to start?
No, I have to say this beforehand that I read Hindi literature, but I have to read it in English first and then I go back to Hindi. Well, I would say Vinod Kumar Shukla should be the one that people start off with in some sense. I don't have a reason for it, but I read him a lot this year, and I think he's the most original voice that I came across this year. In fact, I would say that the book that I read of his this year, They Lived a Window in the Wall, is my favorite book of 2020. Magical realism, yet ingrained in Indian society, and very nuanced and very beautiful and very poetic and very unique. Again, very Miranda July-esque in that sense. They represent a worldview which is just not there, kind of stuff that really makes you feel special because you're reading it, and then envious because you're not the one writing it.
Yeah. And do you also have some favorite book covers?
Yeah, there was this time when I would collect different book covers of the books that I was in love with. So I collected a lot of book covers of Catcher in the Rye, Lust for Life, and The Interpreter of Maladies. These three books I remember. इसका जब भी मुझे अलग कवर दिखता था तो मैं उठा लेता था. My favorite would be, I think, Lust for Life, just a portrait of Vincent, a self-portrait of his, the blue one, which I don't have right now. But yeah, that's a favorite of mine.
So Vaibhav also told me that so I love book dedications. I'm a big fan. And he told me that you were thinking of doing something around the same, and you love book dedications. And so do you have some favorites?
There's this book that I read 2 years ago by Manu Bhattitiri. The name of the book is Savitri and Other Rooms. And the book dedication read, again, I'm paraphrasing, to my grandmother who no one heard. And that's my favorite. One of Nirmal Verma's book dedication. It's not exactly a book dedication, but it's a quote from a story, or rather a piece of Camus, which reads, there's a part of man that doesn't want to love, who only wants to die. And it is that part that needs to be forgiven. But yeah, the first one is my favorite, to my grandmother who no one heard.
Have you ever imagined if you were to write a book, what would be the book dedication that you would give?
Yeah, it changes, So in my diary, I've written to the co-author of all my stories, Kannad, my partner's name. But I think book dedications for me would be different times would mean, and different stories would mean different things. I mean, there has to be one for my parents, my brother, but it depends on the story, I guess, and the
Yeah.
time that you are in. Oh yeah, I have another one which I really like by Manu Joseph. It's not exactly a dedication, but it's more of an acknowledgement from his book, The Illicit Happiness of Other People. And he says, last but not the least, thank you to my daughter who made sure that this book was delayed by 2 years.
Yeah.
I find that to be so funny, dude. So funny.
There's this book that I bought a couple of years ago. It is love poems for married people, something like that. And my dedication is for, and he's written the name of all his ex-girlfriends' wives and crossed them out, and the final name is of the current wife.
There's one more. Ray Bradbury ka hai. Somebody else used his thing. Some other
Yeah.
book, जिसमें Ray Bradbury का था Rocket Man. Don't ever be a rocket man. You know the Rocket Man, huh? When you're here, you wish you were there. When you're there, you wish
Yes.
you were here.
Do you also
Yeah.
read books related to cooking?
I bought this book called not exactly cooking, but something to do with food. Before the Coffee Gets Cold, it's a Japanese book. Then I read Kismat Korma and Kheer by this Scottish woman who collected stories about different food vendors in Delhi, in old Delhi, and where they came from and what was their story. But I will definitely read Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain next year. That's
Yeah.
right there.
I picked up 2 books this year dedicated to spices and cooking because I thought I should try to learn how to cook. And I picked up this one, Tiffin, and there's this woman, the author, she's written the story of Tiffin जो वो school लेके जाती थी. So starting from बचपन का Tiffin to like when she went to college, फिर वहाँ पे क्या टिफिन मिलता था. That's also pretty interesting.
Yeah, I have a lot of them at home. I have this one called Five Morsels of Love by Archana Pidithale. It's one of the best books, food books in India.
Yeah.
Then I got Pangat this year. उससे मैंने बहुत सारी recipes बनाई.
Are there any particular websites as well that you visit for recipes, etc.?
I mean, they're not websites, but there are YouTube channels and one portal.
Yeah.
There is the Goya Journal. So Aisha and Anisha, they have it. So it's just a portal for food and writings around food and recipes and stuff like that. I visit that, and I also YouTube, and there are these 4-5 channels that I visit. Veena's Curry World, Kabita's Kitchen. Those I check out very often.
Do you also read screenplays?
I mean, I've read a couple of them. I've read more than a couple. I've read around 10, 15 of them. But this year I didn't read a single screenplay.
Do you think there's any screenplay that you've read so far that can be used as a study material for someone who's aspiring to be a screenplay writer?
American Beauty is really good. And any of the screenplays by Sorkin is good enough. I mean, I read Lunchbox because I was curious to see how poetic a screenplay can be for a film which is that poetic. And the answer is it's not that poetic, in my opinion, the screenplay. It ends poetically. And that's probably when I realized that no matter how beautiful a film can be, the screenplay on paper may not read as beautifully as it can be translated. It's also an art, I guess, to write a great moving screenplay, a screenplay which can make you cry. I don't know. I have not come across it, but there will be some.
What about the books that have made you emotional?
I think the first time when I cried reading a book was Heavier Than Heaven. That was the name of the book. It's a biography on Kurt Cobain. And I read this when I was in 10th grade. And I read it when I was in London. And I was studying there, and I spent a lot of time alone because my brother was in university and my parents were working. And वहाँ पे क्या होता है London में that school buses नहीं होती, right? So you have to take the public transport or you walk to your school. So that was the first time in my life when I got to spend a lot of time alone. You're walking for 20 minutes and then you're walking back home for 20 minutes. Then you open the घर का दरवाजा and there is no one. And there's double insulation, so which means it's pure silence. And it's cold, and then you heat your chapati. Everything gets amplified, and suddenly you realize how alone you are for the first time in your life. And you want to latch on to things which gave you the impression that they are also alone in the world. For me, Kurt Cobain was that in that sense, like always in school, he was bullied. Not that I was ever bullied, but the one who was always left behind. Plus, you have somewhat of, I wouldn't say teenage angst, because I never had that phase. Maybe I should have had that phase because I fear के कहीं बीच में आ जाएगा 50s में teenager वाली हरकतें ना करने लग जाऊं. But yeah, so I don't know, that made me really, really sad, that book. Also the first time I read a biography, which was not curriculum mein, I was really moved when the friendship sort of ended and when he committed suicide or however he died. Just the fact that, how something beautiful can come crashing down. And I remember I was sitting in my room and I was crying and I couldn't explain to myself why am I crying, And imagine my mother entering as like, Aaja khana tyaar hai, wo bhi banai hai. and suddenly you shoot back to reality and you're like, हाँ gobi बनाई है, and I'm all teary eyed.
Yeah.
And I'm like, हाँ मैं आता हूँ. But now I think in hindsight, I was just sad about the fact that you finally realized how brutal and non-innocent the world is also, You're alone and you see things for what they are also, as opposed to being a boy for like till 10th. You want to play cricket or you want to play football. You want to be naughty in class. You want to think of yourself as some hero in the class and want to flirt with other girls. It's too black and white. But certainly that was the first shot of gray in my life, I would say. And then I think it was Catcher in the Rye. That's when I cried again after I read a book because college khatam hua and everyone started working. And then, you work under people who are older than you and they give you wisdom that, this guy is a fucker and this guy is an asshole or whatever. And you start hearing these things because when you're in college, you don't hear things, ke, matlab, he's a bad person or he's this or he's that. And suddenly you realize that all your friends from college are doing different things and you start creating a self identity of yourself that, oh, I am this, main ye hu. And then again, you ask yourself the biggest question in the world, who am I in all of this? I had also been reading a lot of Chekhov and Manto before that.
Yeah.
And I just remember feeling very tired of life already by the age of 21. I'm like, अरे ये क्या ये जिंदगी क्या है ये क्या है ये मतलब कहाँ मस्ती कहाँ गई and where's the fun in all of this? And then a friend of mine said, just read Catcher in the Rye. And I read it. It was the same emotion that all of this is stupid and all of this is fuck all, but it was said in a way which was funny and it had so much heart and love in it. I know you've done a lot of these. I think you did 5 reasons why you should read Catcher in the Rye. You did one of those videos, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and it made me feel that I'm fucking normal, and I'm not unique, but in a nice way. And at the same time, it gave me this feeling that you always have to protect yourself, and the world will always run at a different, in cinema words, frame rate or different speed. But you have to always protect yourself. And funnily enough, that's what Meera Nair also said for Irfan Khan when he passed away. And Rajiv Masand was doing an interview with her, and he asked her what was so special about him, and she said that he just knew that he had a gift inside him and all he did his entire life was just to protect that gift. Just that whole expression of I want to be that boy standing at the cliff in a field of rye and protecting kids. You can't not grow up, right? Time will always move linearly, but you got to protect that thing inside you. What do you think about the book if you have to summarize it, your feelings towards it?
So I have read the book a lot many times, and it's partly because of my younger sibling. Because, like you said, I walked into his room. He was supposed to study, and it happened like a year ago or 2 years ago. And he was crying because I had moved away and he was going to move away. And I remember he was crying like a little kid, and he told me, like, I don't want to grow up. Post that, I had this sudden realization that you're going to hate this because, as siblings, you're going to grow apart.
Yeah.
And then to protect that relationship, that's the only thing that you can do.
You read Blankets?
No, I haven't.
By Craig Thompson, the graphic novel. You've heard of it, I'm pretty sure.
Yes, I have.
Yeah. Oh man, it's exactly about this. The whole drifting apart of siblings is the most crushing things in the world because you can't explain it. You don't know, like one summer you were totally fine and next summer you go and you're like, oh, I have to think before I speak and why am I hesitating? And it's like a dinosaur has just emerged in the room, on the set that I am in right now. The youngest AD, he's 21. He had a heartbreak during the course of this. And then one day he was talking about his breakup and all. And then he asked me, why is love so hard? Isn't it supposed to be easy? And I'm like, time to gift him Catcher in the Rye. Immediately I ordered Catcher in the Rye. And then I gifted it to him. And then, he read it.
There are certain books that I feel everyone should read at a certain age.
Yeah.
And I really have that for Catcher in the Rye.
The soul of the book is so gentle and yet it's so harsh that no wonder he wrote it when he was in the trenches in the war and he would write then. I keep getting goosebumps and I mean, if I was alone and if you were not there, I would have cried now thinking, thinking about the book.
What was your favorite part of the book?
The first paragraph, because I don't remember ever in my life smiling or laughing while reading a book. And I'm like, this is all, books can be this also. I thought it always has to be intense like Manto or it has to be super real like Check. So I remember laughing. I'm like, fuck, this is amazing. Then the whole explanation of Catcher in the Rye and the way it ends. Oh, and the part where he takes his sister to the fair and she's
And he's just watching her.
He's just watching. Oh man, oh man.
I
How's
think
the
I
document?
cried in that part where he's in the museum and he's like, why can't things be just like that? Everything is just the same.
Yeah,
He's comparing. Like he goes to the school, the abuses are still there, the slangs are still there. And then he goes
yeah.
to the museum, things are just the same. He's like, why can't everything else be like that?
And I think the way it ends also, don't ever talk to
Yeah.
anyone about anything because you'll always end up missing them.
You have some other books that have made you emotional?
Lust for Life, you know.
Yeah.
Very similar in vein. Now I realize Heavier Than Heaven, Catcher in the Lion, Lust for Life. Brutality of the outside world and the beauty of the inside world. So Lust for
Yeah.
Life was again that. If I have to read a book before I die, I'll read Lust for Life. Just the conviction towards living, you know.
Yeah.
And as Indians, you're always exposed to the brutality of the world. You know, the other day I was talking to someone that we are so used to seeing dead things on the road. You'd see
Yeah.
a dead crow, you'd see a dead rat, you'd see a dead human being also. But we are immune to seeing death. It doesn't have any effect on us. But here is this guy, the world turned against him, and yet he was so hopeful. You know, it's the most
Yeah.
inspiring human story ever. His letters to his brother and the
Yeah.
relationship that he shared with his brother, you know. The other thing that happened after I read the book, that I hated everything around me which didn't respect his life, you know. The whole bit about him chopping off his ear. You know, there are these stupid fucking mugs where the mug is this, ye uska kaan hai, and you can take it off and people laugh about it, and there are
Yeah.
memes, and I'm like, you don't even know someone's pain and you laugh about it. And the director of this show, he gifted me a book on Paul Gauguin, and
Oh.
he said, this is the other side of your favorite book. I said, okay, wow, it's right here. One thing that I realized, that, you know, how this book manifested inside me was that it made you a bit like the Vincent's soul, you know, that thing just imbibed it. When things go bad and when things are not going correct, you know, you always think that, you know, I need to protect this and I need to be in love with my work. And being in
Yeah.
love with my work means being in love with yourself in that sense. Sometimes when I meet people, I can identify that, you know, there are people who've been working in the industry for like 15 years and they've not got anything out, but yet, you know, they're always in love with themselves. So I'm like, you know, there's some bit of that here. Suddenly, a book and a life which was lived so many years ago has come alive in different various forms and shapes
Yeah.
in front of me. So you realize that, you know, that book has actually entered you. I consume everything about Vincent van Gogh. I have his paintings in my house. I have so many postcards of his. I have some fridge magnets. I have books. And there was this one thing that I was doing. I would take pictures of anything and everything related to Vincent. And there's a play in Hindi called Tumhara Vincent, जो सुनने में इतना प्यारा लगता है, Tumhara Vincent,
I've actually
which was.
heard of it.
And I should also say that I don't understand his paintings. I actually picked up that book because I was getting bored of films and TV shows. Then there was Joothan by Om Prakash Valmiki. It was the first Dalit biography, you know, and
Yeah.
being an upper caste male dude, things which are so casual for me, and pretty much everything is casual for me. I don't have
Yeah.
to take the brunt of anything in life or the load, and nothing is serious enough for me in that sense. And but that book just made me realize that how growing up in Delhi, you say things very casually, you know, but how each and every
Yeah.
insult sometimes, which is not supposed to be an insult, you know, you saying words which are casteist and all, and how much weight they carry, and they have a generation of pain and complete injustice associated with them. I cried in that book because of anger while reading something, you know.
Yeah.
Like it happens when you're fighting with your either parents or your lover or your brother, and you cry not because you're sad, but you're like, "Fuck, I'm feeling so angry." That book made me feel that. I felt so disgusted by everything around me, by myself, by
Yeah.
old conversations that I had and old things that I heard. I then started reading a lot about caste, and I read 4 5 books on caste and stuff like that. You know, when the Adivasis will not dance, then the other book of the writer
Yeah.
Jwala, and then I read Baluta, and yeah, I just realized that wow, I live in a totally different India. I don't
Yeah.
even know what the fuck is my world. And then what is universal storytelling when you can't even connect it to someone else? Also, that book is very interesting because it keeps asking the reader what is literature and what is universality, because he says all great books are supposed to have that quality, but what if my universe is so different from yours? The idea of great literature is something that has come out of a guy who can afford things that
Yeah.
other people can't, no? So what is the great literature of poor? We don't know.
Like this year, even I picked up a lot of books on Adivasis and written by people from different castes. And that is when I started realizing that I come from such a privileged
Yeah.
background. And then I just felt so ashamed that I don't even have the right to actually speak about it. As a society, we all are guilty of it because we allow it somewhere.
Can't see the world in the same way, and I've not been able to. Literally every time on set, I'm looking at the spot boy and I'm looking at the director, I'm looking at the actors, and I'm like, where they're from, what caste would they be? Everything gets tainted, and rightly so. It was the biggest slap on my face in my entire life. Finally, the book that I read 2 months ago, or rather a month ago, M and the Book Big Hoom by Jerry Pinto, because of the way it ends and what he says about his mother. Because after a point, you want to disassociate with the problems of the family. Because you're like, अच्छा अब ये मेरी जिंदगी नहीं है, अब मेरी जिंदगी बॉम्बे में है, अब मेरे अपने सपने हैं, and all that crap. And you're also reaching an age where your parents are also older. So that fear of their mortality is just there inside you, to the point that sometimes when I'm sleeping in the afternoon and I'll wake up and I'm like, fuck, I hope they're fine right now. It's part of your conscious, it's part of your subconscious all the time. That time period between 21 to 27, you want to disassociate yourself. But from the time you're 27, 28, and your friends also reduce in numbers, and then you realize, I'm just like my father. I'm just like my mother. I sleep like them. I talk like them, and I have the same habits. And then you want to merge with them. Like in that book, what happens when one of them goes away, and then you're just left feeling abandoned and orphaned, and you're like, I am nothing but them, an extension of them, and I can only be a better version or a worse version. The way he writes the last 2 chapters, man. Yeah, it's really moving.
What would that one book be that changed the entire world for you?
Lust for Life, a book that changed me from inside. Something happened, something opened up where I stopped being angry, where I wanted to see the best in people, where I wanted to know what's the good in the world. That was Lust for Life.
Help me out here, because I don't read a lot of self-help books. And sometimes I think it's my arrogance. Like, आप मुझे बताओगे तो how can I actually improve in it? आप advice ही दोगे. And do you think most of us people, including me, we are guilty of looking down upon self-help books? Does that even help? What is your opinion?
I've not read a single self-help. That's because I've been through therapy twice in my life, 2 long sessions, and that didn't help me. Maybe I was arrogant enough. Maybe because I didn't look at the kind of therapy in the way that could fix me. Maybe I felt more ill in that sense, and I didn't like that feeling that there's something wrong with me. But self-help for me, something, and again, it sounds easy because I've not gone through that kind of shit that would make me want to take it up. But self-help for me becomes music, or becomes a walk, or becomes food, or becomes coffee, or becomes another book, or becomes a film. This sounds really cheesy, but every time I see Adam Driver's face, I feel like I'm better than I was 2 seconds ago. Every time I see him act, and I'm like, okay, I need to do great things in life, and I need to be charming while doing that. Or when I'm reading Lena Dunham ka koi Instagram caption, or when I'm seeing Miranda July dance, and suddenly I feel I'm better than I was before. So I've not reached that stage where I can have a judgment on self-help books, but maybe I'm on the same boat as you, to be honest.
So what do you read when you're anxious, or you're feeling lonely, or a little sad? What do you usually prefer reading?
Nirmal Verma, I read him a lot. He's my favorite Hindi writer in that sense. I really, really love him. I think when I'm sad, I'm just sad. And I'll read the book that I'm reading at that point. I don't have a refuge in that sense in books. And I realize my sadness is a lot of times momentarily, and I tell myself, you're feeling down now because you have anxiety, but in 3 days, you will be back up. So for those 3 days, I eat fast food. That's the only thing that I consume. When I'm feeling anxious, I can't read. I don't have that stillness that is required to read.
Do you listen to music us time pe?
Yeah, I tend to listen to that more. I tend to go out for walks. I listen to podcasts, when I'm anxious. I think that kind of somewhat helps me. Some of those podcasts. I'm a big fan of the American life. Something that takes me out of my own head. I think that's the reason why I can't read books. Because if I read books, I keep self-reflecting. My mind is throwing so many thoughts towards me, right? मैं कुछ कर ही नहीं सकता उस time.
Now that we are talking about podcasts, I just realized it. It's by BBC, and I'm forgetting the name of the podcast, but it talks about the menial things. Like in one podcast, they just spoke about pencils. That's it. Like the life of pencils. And all of a sudden, you start personifying them as well. And I really think you should try a podcast on coffee, like making one that way.
Yeah. No, I actually have an idea of podcast, and it's called As If I'm 5. That's what it was called. It was take on the take, then explain to me as if I'm 5. It's like I'm asking you, so who are you? What do you do? And you say that I run a YouTube page called Chalchitra. It's a recommendation plus knowledge channel. Let's put it that way, which I think it is actually. And then we talk from tangibles to intangibles. We go down to the real basics of it. But that was my idea for a podcast. This sounds very asshole-ish, but I feel like I need an assistant in my life at all times. that हाँ ये idea मैंने सोचा अब इसको थोड़ा कुछ कर दे यार. Do the first draft and then give it to me and then I'll be like इसको ऐसे ऐसे करके ऐसे करेंगे.
What are the things that you're really guilty of? Like I sometimes skip through chapters because I'm like नहीं मुझसे नहीं पढ़ा जा रहा. I'll just jump to the 10th chapter after the 5th one because वो ज़्यादा हो गया. 7th chapter से सीधा 10th chapter because I can't do this. What are the things that you are guilty of when you read?
Two things. One is on Kindle it is time remaining because sometimes you really want to get over with it. This year I left only one book in the middle. No, two. Sapiens I'm still reading, but the book that I left after reading 250 pages was V.S. Naipaul's The House of Mr. Biswas.
Yeah.
I left it in the middle. I'm like, fuck, ये नहीं हो रहा यार. अब ये नहीं हो रहा.
Yeah.
Then there are some books that, I savor them and I really, really hold on to them. Like the book that I'm reading right now, Zadie Smith's Grand Station Stories. And I'm like, इसको तो बचाना है bro. ये जल्दी नहीं खत्म करना बिकॉज तुम घर पे नहीं हो और ये मुझे किंडल पे नहीं चाहिए ये तो मुझे पकड़ के पढ़नी है but luckily there's a crossword and I bought it from there and I called them and they said I have two more Zadie Smiths so I'm like fuck it now read it.
Were there more books as well that you tried holding on to?
Well, the Vinod Kumar Shukla book, The Illicit Happiness of Other People by Manu Joseph, so good man, so good, broke me into pieces again. I think that's one of the best Indian books I've ever read in my life. Then Ghachar, then I read M and the Big Hoom, then I read Jeanette Winterson's Why Be Happy When You Can Be Normal. I think I got teary-eyed in that also. Like The Illicit Happiness of Other People, I woke up every day an hour before my partner and we were in Pune at that time so that I can go down, drink a cup of filter coffee and just read that book very slowly, and reread it. I really wish I can go back to that book as if I've never read it again. What are the books that you really, really savored this year?
The one that I recently finished, at one point I was like, mujhse nahi hoga. And
which one?
It was Pure by Andrew Miller.
Okay.
And almost a chapter later, I was like, fuck, this was a great turn of events. But yeah, I think another book that I really, really loved this year was New York, Oliver and I. So you heard of Oliver Sacks? It's by his partner and he's written about New York. So it has images of New York and it's about the final days of Oliver and his relationship with the partner. It's sort of a memoir, but it's very beautiful.
Which has been the funniest book that you've ever read?
It's funny poems by, I think they're kindergarten students or whatever. What about you?
Killing and Dying. It's a graphic novel about suburban America. And that's my favorite genre of films also. The stories about people living in suburbs in America. But I really laughed a lot in Catcher in the Rye, by the way.
What is your opinion of Chetan Bhagat? Like, people judge everyone who reads Chetan Bhagat. Do you have an opinion of him?
It's like, people who drink the coffee that I drink shit on people who drink Nescafe. But it's fucking personal, man. I say to anyone, you drink whatever you want, you consume whatever you want, but just be open to something else. That's all. I have no problem with somebody saying, oh, I love Chetan Bhagat and the other person saying, I love Virginia Woolf. If you put these two people on two tables and say, kiske saath dinner pe karega, my preference would be 50 and 50, like 50% this, 50% that. I honestly think I've crossed that path in my life and I'm very glad about it because I wasn't being a nice person. I started shitting on my own friends because I used to read more than them and I didn't like that part of me. I used to tell myself, oh, see, you are cool. You'll have cool things to say on dates and stuff. It drove me down a rabbit hole because people actually are having more fun than I ever have. So how is this fucking book helping me? Because on Saturdays, I'm the one telling people, nahi yaar, main nahi aa raha. And I'm like, haan, main book padunga. And then next morning on Sundays, I'll go on Facebook and I'll see everybody having a great time. And then I ask myself, what were you doing? Oh, you were reading a book because you thought you should be reading a book. Not because you were wanting to read a book. So now I'm of the opinion, man, just be a nice person and do whatever you want, but be open to things.
Have you read Chetan Bhagat and his books?
I read Chetan Bhagat's 5.7. I read 3 Mistakes of My Life and I read the third one. But by the third one, I was done. I like 5.7. Especially remember that scene where he says, oh, her feet touched the pedal. And the mechanical engineer in me got supremely excited looking at a thing of beauty touching something which is made up of pure mechanics and physics. And I was like, fuck, this is great.
What were your favorite moments this year when you were reading? That's a very subjective question. I'm sorry. But I just wanted to know.
Well, you read Illicit?
Illicit Happiness of...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would like to believe till then, I believed in things in the world and universe which couldn't be explained. I genuinely believed in that. But once that was revealed, what happened? A part of me stopped believing in the idea of magic and it didn't bring me any sorrow. It just made me more calm because it just gave me that stability that, oh, there are some things which happen because there are people doing certain things. So there's a logical explanation to things,
Yeah.
So that moment was a release. And it wasn't not just a release in the story, but it was a release in my mind also, because I stopped believing in things which didn't have a reason. I believed everything has a reason and everything has some sort of purpose. There's this really beautiful sequence in Vinod Kumar Shukla's They Lived a Window in the Wall, where the couple escapes the room through the window. I think they make love near the river bed.
Yeah.
And the way he talks about how the stars were moving that night. And I was like, fuck, this is so
That's a
this is so good. And how the frogs were talking and how everything just became one. And yeah, it's magical realism at its purely best form. Yeah, it's really good, man. That I really loved. And also I read this book by Saman Subramanian called This Divided Land on the Sri
yeah.
Lankan War. Uska pehla ek book tha Following Fish, which was one of my most favorite non-fiction books. This Divided Land is about the Sri Lankan War. So this chunk was about a Sri Lankan artist who went back to the people who had to leave their houses and asked them, you know, what do you miss and what was home for you? And almost everyone just remembered home as the trees that were near their house, or हमारे घर पे एक पेड़ था, you know, and the importance of trees for people, because it came out of nowhere, you know.
Yeah.
And the number of times, and including my partner, because she left home and her house got sold, and so many other people जिनसे भी मैं पूछता हूँ ना तो क्या फील होता है, because I never had that feeling. And they always say यार एक पेड़ था यार, पता नहीं नानी का जमाने का पेड़ था, वो कट गया था यार जाते जाते, वो बड़ा दुख हुआ. He puts it very nicely. Again, I'm paraphrasing that it's funny that all these people were uprooted like the trees, but the only thing that they remember were the things that held them to the ground. And much like the trees, the soil, and much like the soil that
Yeah.
these guys were living on. And of course, the last few chapters of them and the big Hoom. वो बड़ा अच्छा लगता है यार, जब कभी कुछ funny suddenly serious हो जाता है, कभी कुछ funny suddenly emotional हो जाता है, and
Yeah.
without the help of background music, you know.
Yes.
And you're like, oh fuck, it suddenly feels like you've slipped into a blanket and like your body temperature has changed. Yeah, I really like that.
I remember I read The Help. I was in college and I remember curling up on my bed and crying like an idiot, and my parents were visiting and they thought I don't know it. But yeah. I know you're coming on the channel for the second time now. And what is that one thing that you really like about Chalchitra Talks? And what is that one thing that you think you would want to change?
One thing I like about Chalchitra Talks is that how it is always present in my life. You can't escape it, not that you want to, but
Yeah.
I know I see you now and I'll see you again at 10 o'clock, either today or tomorrow. So how it is always present. Like my favorite YouTube content creator is this guy called Saurabh Joshi Vlogs. He stays in Haryana and he just makes simple vlogs with his families. I don't know what I said, honestly.
No, that's completely okay.
Yeah, I don't know what you guys can change, but what I told Vaibhav a couple of months ago is that I don't know whether he realizes that he actually has a very strong bunch of individuals who are interested in things. This sort of network one doesn't come across very often, if ever in their lives.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that needs to be treasured. And what I was telling him was that, you know, if somebody like me comes up with a show, a new show or a new script, the first people that I would want to float it by will be the people of Chalchitra Talks, the creators and the consumers, because I know that इनसे मुझे एक point of view मिलेगा. और अगर Chalchitra Talks नहीं होता, I don't know मैं कहाँ जाऊँ to get an honest feedback from people. So I think that is a really, really powerful tool, which should be used wisely.
You know what? On a serious note, I'll share the podcast link with you as well on pencils. And you should do something similar around coffee, because there were so many layers to pencils as well. And I was watching a video to prepare for this conversation and you were explaining about coffee and I was like, you know what, that would go so well with that. I go back and listen to that podcast so many times because the guy explains pencils and his love for them and how many layers there are. It's about the lead, it's about the point, and it's about the look, and how he's associated each pencil with a particular time in his life. And the way he narrates it, it's so beautiful.
Nice, very nice. I'll check it out.
Great, Dhruv. So I think my questions bhi khatam ho gaye. So we'll end it here. Thank you so much.
Hello guys, hope you're well. And please like this video if you like the video. And don't forget to comment if you have anything to say. But do subscribe.